Good afternoon. My name is Bettina Klein. I'm with NASA Communications, and welcome to this post-launch press conference talking about the in-flight abort of SpaceX's Crew Dragon, an important part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Today with us, we have some great guests who will provide some remarks. First will be Jim Bridenstine, NASA Administrator, Elon Musk, Chief Engineer at SpaceX, Kathy Leaders, the Program Manager for Commercial Crew Program at NASA, and astronauts Mike Hopkins and Victor Glover. They'll begin with, as I mentioned, opening remarks, and then we'll open it to questions from both the members, the media in the audience, and those who have called via the phone, and also social media. You can ask your questions on social media by using the hashtag AskNASA. With that, let's kick it off with Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you, Bettina. Another amazing milestone is complete for our very soon-to-be project, which is launching American astronauts on American rockets from American soil for the first time since the retirement of the space shuttles. We're very grateful. Congratulations to SpaceX and the entire NASA team on this final major flight milestone that we needed to accomplish. Make no mistake, there's a lot left to do. We have a number of parachute tests upcoming, and of course we're going to get a lot of data from this particular test, and so we're not quite there yet, but by all accounts this was a very successful test. And when we think about what we have done so far with the Crew Dragon, we've had a pad abort test that was successful. We've had now a high altitude abort test that has been successful. On Demo 1, we launched, we controlled the spacecraft, we docked to the International Space Station, we undocked, and then we had entry, descent, and landing. So this is a program that is moving forward very fast, and I personally want to give my strongest congratulations to the NASA team, which has been amazing, and of course the SpaceX team, which has also been amazing. So congratulations to everybody involved, and I'll turn it over to Elon.
All right. Well, let's see. I'd like to, likewise, just express great appreciation and admiration for the SpaceX and NASA teams that made this happen. Without a lot of dedicated people at SpaceX and NASA, this would not have happened. So it's just thank you for your hard work and dedication to achieving this the success of this mission. There's I think a few points that are kind of exciting to note. That the peak velocity of Dragon during abort was more than double the speed of sound. It went to Mach 2.2 and achieved an altitude of 40 kilometers or 131,000 feet. So I think these are pretty exciting specs, to be for the sport to have gone more than 3 times the altitude of a typical airliner, and to accelerate that rapidly away from a booster. And I think if you saw in the video, the booster actually exploded as expected. So that was very exciting, and it landed in relatively high winds at the ocean level, which I think helps us envelope the mission for when it is crewed, since we expect this to be sort of an enveloping condition for the winds at sea level at the recovery site for when crews are launched. So overall, as far as we can tell thus far, it is a picture-perfect mission. It went as well as one could possibly expect, and again, dedication. This is a reflection of the dedication of the hard work of the SpaceX NASA teams to achieve this goal. Obviously, I'm super fired up. This is great. It's really great, and we're looking forward to the next step, and I think we'll talk more about next steps in as we get further into comments.
And I'm super fired up too. This is really exciting. As we talked about when we all got together, gosh, was it a couple of days ago? We said this was going to be an exciting test. My boss told me, hey, don't talk about launch vehicle launches and exciting at the same time, but I think you guys saw today that it was a very exciting test. I'm also super proud of the team. I really appreciate the comments from Jim and Elon. Not only was it a NASA SpaceX team, it was a multi-agency, the FAA, the Air Force, the DET, everybody's out there, made sure that we had imagery assets and the ability to be able to accomplish this mission. And honestly, folks are out there right now recovering the spacecraft, which is going to be very, very critical for us. We're super excited that it all went well. You know, we talked about needing to thread the needle with all the weather, and we did. We did have to thread the needle. In fact, the needle was getting, the head, you know, the eye was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and all this will be good data for us and for our crews that will be flying soon. So thank you, Elon, to your team. Fabulous job. Thank you to the NASA team. Fabulous job, and looking forward to the next steps.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Wow, what a day. Yeah, I also want to say it's very exciting to see this. And it's great to get to this major test milestone. We appreciate certainly all of the hard work that the NASA and the SpaceX teams and everybody else that made this event happen. As crew members, our families, you can imagine, we're very interested in these escape systems and how well they work. And so we're going to be following very closely as the data comes in and we continue to analyze it and see what that means. And in fact, the work is ongoing, as was mentioned. The recovery operations, Bob and Doug, the DM2 crew, are actually taking this opportunity to follow those operations and see what they can learn from that. Because this is one of the first time, or one of the only times they'll have an opportunity to see those operations when it's not them. So again, congratulations, and we look forward to the next steps as well.
And since my comments are the only thing between us and your questions, I'll keep it brief. First, to our families that are out there watching, a lot of them were very interested in this test for obvious reasons, and so far what we've seen is what we expected. So that's the first one. And then to you all, the team that has helped make this happen, SpaceX, NASA, the Air Force, and all of the folks who worked so hard to get us to this point, from the crew, but also from our families, we want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to now take questions from the media. We'll take a few questions here, and then we'll go to those that have called in social media. With that, we'll first start with Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. Elon, Kathy told us the other day that you could carry crew as soon as March. Is that feasible, and when do you think the crew launch might be?
Well, we were just talking about this in the green room, and my guess is the first question that will be asked is. So we agreed on a response. So it's collectively. This is not. So the hardware necessary for the first crewed launch, we believe, will be ready by the end of February. However, there's still a lot of work once the hardware is ready to just cross-check everything, triple check, quadruple check, go over everything again until every stone has been turned over 3 or 4 times. And there's also the schedule for getting to space station. So because a space station has a lot of things going to it. So what's the right timing for this? And the sort of collective wisdom at this point is that we think we're highly confident the hardware will be ready in Q1, most likely end of February, but no later than March. And that we think it appears probable that the first crewed launch would occur in the second quarter.
Oh, I think that's a very fair assessment. I would also say we have to make some decisions on our end from a NASA perspective. Do we want that first crew to be a short duration, or do we want it to be a longer duration? If it's going to be a longer duration, then we have to have some additional training for our astronauts to actually be prepared to do things on the International Space Station that we weren't planning to have that initial test crew necessarily do. So we've got to look at that and make a determination. Do we want that first crew to be longer duration, or do we want them to be a quick turnaround? And those are decisions that we're going to be making in the coming weeks. But as Elon said, there's a lot of we have to understand all of the data. This was a test. It looked beautiful. We all loved watching it. But now the work begins for evaluating everything that we're going to learn on this test.
Yeah. To be clear, the data or telemetry all looks picture perfect, at least as far as we've seen thus far. But we need to physically recover the spacecraft and confirm that there's not something that not an issue that perhaps didn't show up on telemetry. Yeah.
Next question. Chris Davenport.
Hi, Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. I guess for Elon and Jim, and I wonder if you chose this as the second question in your betting pool, if you could talk about how profound it would be and what it would mean to restore human spaceflight from U.S. soil. It seems like we're at a real turning point, and it's just that closer, what that would mean from both SpaceX perspective and from NASA's. Thank you.
I'll let you go, Elon.
Oh, okay. I was going to let you. Well, I think it's really quite profound. I think the United States is very much a nation of explorers, a distillation of the human spirit of exploration, and it's obviously something that appeals to people with who have an adventurous. Anyone who has an adventurous bone in their body is going to be very excited about this, and I think it will help reinvigorate interest in space. It's remarkable to think that the last time that a crewed launch vehicle departed from the United States was, I believe, 2011 or thereabouts. So it's been almost a decade, which is remarkable. And so I think it'll be really really profound to have that. It's kind of to be back in the saddle again and to be launching frequently with an astronaut crew. I think it's something that matters to all Americans and to people worldwide.
And I would say certainly we are 100%. We are a nation of explorers. We're also a nation that leads, and this, of course, represents us returning American astronauts to space on American rockets from American soil. So this is a great opportunity for us to once again lead. And this time when we lead, we're doing it differently than we've ever done it before. NASA is going to be a customer. We're going to be one customer of many customers, and we want Elon to have lots of customers. But we also want to have numerous providers. We need dissimilar redundancy. You guys have heard me say this. I'm going to keep saying it. We've had days in this country where we lost a space shuttle and our space program was down for a period of years at a time. We need to make sure that we have redundancy in a way that doesn't happen again. And of course, if we look at what we've done with commercial resupply to the International Space Station, there's a perfect example of how sometimes when there is a setback, we can continue to move forward because we have other solution sets to accomplish the objectives. So all of this is important for a very specific reason. We're on the cusp of commercializing low Earth orbit. I want to see large amounts of capital flowing into activities that include humans in space. And those activities could be industrialized biomedicine, it could be advanced materials, and it could be people that want to go to space for tourism purposes. But I will tell you this, there is a future where space is commercialized. And I also want to be clear that NASA will always have a presence in low Earth orbit. We are not, there's a lot left to learn. We are only on the beginning of what we're going to learn. So what does that mean? That means NASA is going to be a customer. We just want to make sure there are customers that are not just NASA. That drives down our costs, it increases our access, and it's not just for us, but for the entire world and for the private sector as well.
Next question. Lauren, second row.
Hi, Lauren Gresh with The Verge. The explosion that happened today with the Falcon 9 looked really cool, but I'm curious to know what would happen if an explosion like that occurred while the Crew Dragon was still attached. The Crew Dragon was quite a bit away when it occurred, but is there any concern about that happening for the crew's safety, and how quickly does that capsule move away in those first couple of seconds?
Sure. In principle, the system is designed to withstand a sort of a first stage booster explosion that is, or upstage explosion that is there. That happens when basically even before the escape event. So it's intended to be very robust in principle. And the way you think of the rocket booster is it's less of an explosion than it is fire. So it's a fireball, but it's much more fireball than it is an overpressure event like an explosion. Since the spacecraft has a very powerful base heat shield and even leeward side heat shield, it should be really not significantly affected by a fireball. So it could quite literally, like something out of Star Wars, fly right out of the fireball. So that's obviously we want to avoid doing that, but but it is really meant to be something that can fly out of the fireball. There may be a few points that are worth mentioning. That in how is Dragon better than some what was done, say, during the Apollo era. The fact that the launch board system is integrated with the spacecraft, with the Super Draco thrusters in the sidewall, means that you have launch board capability all the way to orbit. And whereas previously with the launch escape tower, that because it's so heavy, that is discarded often just 20 or 30% of the time into flight. So shortly, not long after liftoff, the typically launch escape tower, which is sort of the historical architecture, would be discarded. So you would lose the ability to abort after that point. Whereas Dragon has abort capability all the way to orbit. And then if you have a state change, anything that's a significant state change post liftoff is something to be concerned about. And not having to eject the launch escape tower, I think, is also an improvement in safety. So I think those two are significant steps in the right direction. There's also an improved ability for reusability, since you're not throwing away the launch escape tower. You retain the Super Draco thrusters. You can now reuse the launch escape system with every flight, because it should hopefully be very rare that the escape thrusters are used. So that I think those three points are a meaningful improvement over designs in the past. And then one of the things obviously this requires ongoing discussions with NASA, but I think it would be quite cool to use the boats that we are using to catch the fairing, once that is really well established, to catch Dragon as it's coming in from orbit, and then that would alleviate some of the constraints around a water landing. But that's obviously there's some time before making that happen, and we obviously need to recover fairings reliably before we would consider trying to catch the Dragon. But I think that would be also an improvement as opposed to landing in the water.
And if I can just add one thing to what Elon's saying, one of the most important things is that we're monitoring the vehicle, the launch vehicle, to make sure that you're recognizing when the launch vehicle is having a problem so that the abort system's working, right? So we've spent a lot of time together talking about, how does the spacecraft monitor the launch vehicle and then make sure that it's going to abort before it starts getting into those situations too, right? So all the things Elon's kind of like icing on the cake and additional. The spacecraft's robust. It can handle, these kinds of situations, but more importantly, we're getting the crew away before the launch vehicle is in a position where you're having to expose the crew to the fireball, right?
So and everything he said is absolutely accurate. There are huge advantages to integrating the launch abort system into the spacecraft itself. And that those advantages are we can abort all the way out to almost space. The downside is it's engineeringly it's a very difficult thing to achieve, and of course we learned that back in April when we had some oxidizer go into the pressurant system and resulted in a catastrophic loss. But that's why we do these things. That's why we test, and because of the way we're acquiring this, we have very innovative partners that are doing things that have never been done before with a purpose. The purpose is to ultimately save lives, drive down costs, and increase access to space. So all of these things are working. It is absolutely true that we will have setbacks as we learn these things, but it is also true that we are going to be better off for it. And of course, what Kathy said is absolutely true as well. This spacecraft knows precisely where it is in space. Latitude, when I say space, I don't mean outer space, I just mean in space in general. Latitude, longitude, altitude, yaw, pitch, roll, trajectory, velocity. It constantly knows where it's supposed to be, and it knows what's happening to it. And so it can make a determination early, before the explosion were to happen, to execute the launch abort capability. So I think we're where we need to be, but it hasn't been without pain. And going forward, we're going to be better for it.
Great. Joey, second row. Yeah.
Question for Jim and Elon. First, Elon, will you be able to recover any of the Falcon 9 or its second stage? How badly damaged was it when it hit the ocean? And have you? There was a pretty tall plume of smoke, so I don't know. And for future Crew Dragon missions, have you signed up any private astronaut missions yet? Does this test kind of push forward any agreements with that? And for Bridenstine, similarly, have you signed up any international partners? And what does this mission mean for that? Thanks.
Well, there's definitely not any big pieces of the rocket left. If you saw something, there was a sort of object that was sort of falling. We think that's most likely the thrust structure of the first stage propulsion section, which is extra robust and has the engines in it. But that is going to hit the water hard and then be somewhere down at the bottom of the ocean. So we're not expecting to recover anything. In general, we would not expect to recover anything in a launch abort scenario. So that it seems quite unlikely. I think we don't have any anything to announce in that regard at this time.
I think we need more customers, is what I think.
Yeah.
But on the international front, you should know this. We have no shortage of partners that are wanting to have access to space, and this is going to give not just us, but them additional access to space. We don't have any agreements at this point to ride on these vehicles, although we're going to have, the International Space Station, we've got 15 nations that operate it. We've had astronauts from 19 different nations, and we anticipate those partnerships all to go forward. And of course, they're going to be very excited about riding on a Falcon rocket and in a Crew Dragon. Yep.
Great. We're going to take some questions from the reporters that are on the line. The first one is from Jackie Waddles, CNN. Jackie?
Hey, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. So I wanted to check in about the parachutes. I know it's early, but were you pleased with how the Mark III parachutes performed today? And then with whatever testing that you still have ahead for the parachutes, what are you still hoping to determine?
Kathy, why don't you take it?
So today was the second system level test, what we're viewing as a second system level test of the upgraded, what we call our Mark III chute design. SpaceX has been doing a tremendous amount of testing over this last 6 months. I mean, really perfected the design, did a system level test in December, did another system level test, obviously today in a pretty stressing environment, and then we're working together to get a new set of flight chutes and do 2 more system level tests prior to our next crewed flight test. Working through that with SpaceX, and looking forward to further learning and hopefully, smooth parachute functioning on the next 2 system level tests. But we're very, very happy. If you saw it today, flawless execution of both the drogues and the mains, and both of those were the new system.
And I would say from NASA's perspective, we are so grateful to SpaceX for stepping up to the plate in a major way to move forward with the Mark III parachutes. There was a time we looked at the safety factor from a Mark II to Mark III. Mark II was good. Mark III was way better. Elon and I had a conversation. I said, look, if we want to move forward quickly, let's go with the Mark III, and let's get as much testing as we can possibly get done between now and the day we launch Crew. And they move forward very quickly. I don't know how many tests you've done at this point, but it's a lot with single shoots. And now we're up to the point where we're doing full system level tests with all 4 shoots. And so far they're looking good. So we're grateful to the SpaceX team. I also want to say thank you to the Airborne team. I've had a couple of conversations with the CEO of Airborne, told him what a high priority this is for our nation. And they've been working overtime to make sure these parachutes are developed and packed, and we're grateful for their support as well.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thanks for the Airborne team. They've been essential in this.
This is an unprecedented amount of parachute testing I think that we've ever seen from a NASA perspective. So really great partnership across the NASA, SpaceX, and Airborne team.
Our next question is from Tim Fahrenholtz from Quartz.
Hello, everybody. Congratulations on the test today. I just wanted to ask if we could get some understanding of what the next couple months look like from an analysis perspective. How many people at NASA are going to be working on certifying the Dragon and the Starliner eventually for the crewed flight tests, and how does that compare to the experience during the COTS program?
Kathy?
So I actually worked on both cargo and then now crew, right? And I'll tell you from a station perspective, which is what the cargo program was focused on, it's consistent between obviously cargo and crew. What's different is that obviously crew's different, and the certification requirements for crew are different. So I think even though we have a small program standpoint, I think we're probably about 2 to 3 times the amount of NASA folks that are working crew versus cargo, the certification aspect of cargo, which to me makes a lot of sense because cargo was really focused, the NASA certification aspect was just focused on making sure the vehicle could safely dock with station. For crew, obviously, we need to make sure we're certifying the ground systems, the operations, the launch vehicle, and the spacecraft. So obviously, that's kind of 4 times the amount of work that you had to do for cargo. So that's kind of sized appropriately to me.
Okay. We'll take one more question from the phone, and then we'll go back into the room. And next is Irene Klotz from Aviation Week.
My question's for Elon. Does this in-flight abort test have any applications for programs beyond commercial crews, specifically for Starship? And also, does somebody have the exact wind speed at the recovery site? Thank you.
Okay. No, I don't think this has. It's not directly relevant to Starship, as we do not expect to use parachutes on Starship. Albeit, like the only reason Starship is happening is because of the progress made with essentially all the work done by NASA and others before SpaceX even started, and the support that we've received after starting, without which Starship would not be possible. And I didn't catch the second question. Touchdown? Wind speed touchdown. Wind speed touchdown, I believe was I think around 25 to 30 feet per second.
Wind speed at touchdown was 27 knots.
Yeah, 27 knots. Yeah.
Feet per second, sorry, 27 feet per second.
Yeah.
17,
So
17, yeah, 20, yeah, I'm sorry, 20, not, that would have been a stressing test. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was oscillating, but it's
Yeah.
sort of in the high 20s. Yeah.
13 to 18 knots,
Yeah.
and I think we got like
But
27 feet per
it
second.
provides a good envelope in case for crewed missions.
Yeah.
Our next question?
Mary Liz with Cosmic Perspective. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations on this very exciting, momentous occasion. When you two walked in the room, you were beaming, and so I really want to hear from you what it was like. Where did you watch from? Was it the control room? Was any of your family with you? And what did you learn?
So yeah, we were in the firing room, and anytime you see a rocket launch is very exciting. And obviously, the significance of this particular launch and the test was something that we were particularly interested in, and to see that our families were not here with us; they were back home. But I did receive a text from my wife right afterwards, and said everything looked good from her perspective. So. So they're obviously very interested in it as well, and again, every time I'm out here, this is just a special place, and when you get to see these rockets launch, it just gives you goosebumps, and I'm getting goosebumps again right now.
So no, the families weren't there. My wife also was in touch via text message, and learning that happened today, or maybe relearning or adding more context to the fact that we have an amazing team working through the issues with the weather and making sure that the vehicle, both Falcon and Dragon, were ready to launch. It was just impressive to be on the loops and listen to them disposition all of those things and make sure that we would have a test at all. So just getting to the point where we could launch, it was impressive to be there amongst the folks making it happen.
Cricket, we're going to take a question from social media quickly.
All right, I have a question from Ashley James Lee. She says, great test, well done. What would be the reason for the splashdown being earlier than expected on the timeline?
It wasn't.
I thought it was pretty much right on target for what we were expecting. So obviously we can go back and look at the data, but right now it's looking like things were pretty nominal.
Yeah.
Next question. Right here, third row. I don't know if I got it.
Thank you. Sawyer Rosenstein with Talking Space. So I know a lot of the focus is obviously going to be on the data from the Crew Dragon, but I was also wondering how much data you were able to get after the breakup of the first stage, and if there's any plans to use that data for possible future mission parameters for crew or for range or anything like that.
We lost telemetry on the first stage shortly after it exploded.
From the breakup of the vehicle that could possibly change design or engineering in the future of it?
It's possible, but it's too early to say at this point.
Gotcha.
Okay. Third row, I'm sorry, on this side with the hat.
Hi, I'm Jim Siegel. I'm with NASA Tech, and I have a couple of questions. Well, actually, one question, I suppose, for the two astronauts. I understand you went through kind of a dress rehearsal on Friday. So you got a chance to get into the capsule while it was atop the rocket. And I'm interested in what kinds of activities that you did while you were doing this. What systems did you check out? Did you eat? Did you take a nap? What did you do?
Right. So the dress rehearsal, actually, Bob and Doug were the ones that participated in that as the DM2 crew. And essentially it started from crew wake-up all the way through listening to a weather brief and then getting handed over to SpaceX at the suit-up room. And so they were then able to don their suits and go through that full process of checking the suits for leaks. And then from there, walking out to the vehicles, getting in the convoy, and going from our crew quarters over to the launch pad itself. And then going up onto the tower and walking out on the crew arm. They did not actually get into the vehicle because the vehicle wasn't in a configuration for them to get strapped in or anything. And so that was the point where that dress rehearsal ended. The a lot of that data was timeline type data that we were getting, just making sure everything flowed together. The communication was good between all of the different team members. And I think there was a lot of lessons learned that came out of it, and people are making adjustments as necessary based on what we saw. Anything else? Nope. Yeah. Thank you. You bet.
Okay. Chris, over here in the second row.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight. For Jim and Elon, you mentioned that the decision will be forthcoming in the next few weeks as to whether DM2 will be short duration or long duration. I'm wondering from NASA's side why that hasn't been decided yet this close to a particular launch, especially with the U.S. crew segment reducing down in size in the coming months. And from SpaceX's perspective, is there anything that would have to be done to the capsule at this point, depending on what that decision is?
So by standard, if we go with the plan as it currently stands, we would launch, DM2 as a short duration test flight, and then we would have an operational flight test later with our 2 astronauts here, and they would do a long duration flight. So that's one solution, and that's where things stand as of right now. But we might look at making that first crew be a longer duration crew, for the purpose of getting the maximum amount of capability out of the International Space Station, with having, basically we'll be able to maintain a larger presence of astronauts on the space station for a longer period of time. So there's another competing interest here, and in order to make that happen, that first crew for DM1, the test flight, that crew would need to go through some additional training for a longer duration flight to do activities on the International Space Station. It also gives us opportunities to do extravehicular activities that may not right now be scheduled, but may pop up based on things that happen on the ISS. And it's always better to have more crew on board for those activities rather than less. If we end up with 1 American on the International Space Station, then that American will be doing the EVA. And we want to make sure that we give us the best chance of success. Now, I'm not saying that this is the direction we're going to go. We just haven't decided yet, and we're working through it. But the good thing is, given what looks like to be a very successful test, we now have options. So that's a positive thing.
From a SpaceX standpoint, we'll make sure we're ready to serve whatever needs NASA may have. And so whatever decision is made, that we can support either.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've insured the vehicle. We've been working with SpaceX to ensure the vehicle really has had the capability to be able to have a longer duration mission really over the last 6-7 months. Been working with SpaceX. Just like Jim said, you always need to have options when you're dealing with these types of missions.
Emery in the 4th row.
Hey, question for Elon. Obviously, an abort scenario is a different kind of stress on the
stress.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that impacts reusability. Do you get fewer flights out of a Crew Dragon in that scenario, or is that to be determined?
I'm not sure. We would really require a lot of thought and, of course, support from NASA to refly a Dragon that went through an abort. I hope that there's such a rare event that the circumstance never comes up.
I'll tell you one thing that impressed me. When we looked at the ballistic reentry that Nick Hague went through on a Soyuz rocket just a year ago, he was up around 6.5, almost 7 G on that ballistic reentry. Now, he was at a much higher altitude, but this entire launch abort sequence that we just saw, the highest G state was about 3.5 Gs, and then when it was coming back, we're looking at like 2.3 G, which is that's impressive. It looked like it would have been maybe a rough ride, but the data didn't bear that out, and I think that gives our astronauts some confidence that the ride might not be so bad if we have to execute one of these launch abort capabilities.
Yeah, the launch abort capability is in principle capable of up to sort of six or more Gs, but it limits the acceleration to maximize the comfort of the or safety of the astronauts. So it's reconfiguring depending upon what achieves the maximum probability of safety and minimizes injury.
Next question. To the writer.
Hi, Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. Can someone update us on the condition of the spacecraft after the splashdown? Have the recovery teams got to it? Is it on the boat yet? And seats from Russia to get through the year or into next year, or is that still ongoing?
So at this point, as much confidence as we have in the team, I think it's probably not prudent to go that direction. I think it's important that we have options. Again, we want to increase our option space and make sure that the International Space Station has continuous American presence. And so we're not ready to make any adjustments on that front. We're going to buy another Soyuz seat.
Sorry, I was just looking to see if I'd received an update, but I think the recovery vessel is just securing it right now, so we do not have additional information at this time.
Question here, second row.
Congratulations, Robin from Supercluster. Have you flown the Dragon simulator in Hawthorne, and have you tried on the suit multiple times?
I've tried. I've tried it on the helmet, and I've flown the docking simulator several times. You know,
I'll tell you, I am. I nailed it first time, and of course every time since.
But you had Bob and Doug's help.
I did.
I know.
I think it's good. But having played a lot of video games as a youth is probably helpful. But it's the Dragon actually approaches the space station very slowly, so it's actually very much slower than people realize. So I think it's not very difficult to dock with the space station because it is approaching very slowly, and you have very fine controls. In fact, you can adjust between sort of course corrections and fine control corrections. So you can adjust the thrusters to have sort of nuanced effects, or like broad brushstroke, fine brushstroke, and I think it's pretty straightforward to dock in light of that.
Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. Question for pretty much anyone who can answer it. Elon, Kathy, Jim, the exact sequence of events today. It was kind of hard to tell actually when we're seeing the feed, and of course from the press site we just saw a cloud. Was it an engine shutdown was the initial trigger, and then did the Dragon, was the actual abort sequence? Was it the Dragon was triggered to abort, and then the engines shut down after that? And then, or was it like the shutdown of the engines? And then the sequence of events was actually kind of confusing and hard for us to figure out. And of course, we didn't really see much. Can you actually run us through what exactly was programmed when and how it all triggered and what triggered what, I guess, the chain of events?
Actually, I was thinking about posting the time sequence of events, what occurs in the course of about 700 milliseconds. It's really way more than a human could do is occurring in a fraction of a second. But the engines there's a command to the engines to shut down, and then the abort system then presses up very rapidly. The Super Dracos are ignited. It initiates separation from the upper stage. But all of this is occurring in literally a split second, it's really quite remarkable how quickly those engines reach full thrust, and all 8 of them do, and then it controls via differential thrust of the eight Super Draco engines, and so it's making those thrust adjustments at the almost the millisecond level. It's very, very fast.
And then the engines were shut down after that. So
Yeah.
Then the launch vehicle, the first stage engines were all shut down at that stage.
So just to clarify, like the actual, I'm just trying to still figure out if it's like because the engine shut down that inherently triggered the abort, or was
No.
that all pre-planned and hard sequence basically?
As part of the abort sequence, like if the system detects that there's the things are severe enough to initiate an abort. In this case, we set the abort triggers to be super low, such that they would occur at a very specific sort of velocity. As part of the abort sequence, one of the things that's done is issue a command to the engines to shut down. But you don't wait for them to get fully shut down. You issue command shutdown, and then you pressurize the abort system, the Super Draco abort system, and this, a lot of these things are happening in parallel. So you're not waiting for one thing to occur after another. A lot of them are occurring in parallel. But it's saying shut down main engines, cut thrust, and then pressurize the abort system and fire up the abort system with all 8 Super Dracos. It's capable of working even if one of the Super Dracos does not. So it's got engine out capability on the abort system, and then it's going,
So remember what the goal is. The goal is to get as much separation from the booster as possible as soon as possible. And what we saw is we got some data on this initially. It was correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like a kilometer of distance between a mile of distance between the booster and the Dragon, and it was just in a matter of seconds that separation was created. So that just shows you the capability, and all the while, never exceeding 3.5 Gs. I mean, that's really amazing.
Yeah, even if it were to be the case that the booster engines continued firing after shutdown command, Dragon has enough thrust to accelerate away from the booster very rapidly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This is going to conclude our press conference. I'd like to invite if any of our speakers have some closing remarks.
I think we should have our astronauts say a few words.
Well, again, I'll just reiterate today was a very important day for us in the test program, and I think for all of the astronauts, we're very excited at what we've seen to this point, and we look forward to seeing the rest of the results. And we look forward to our continuing preparations for Doug and Bob to launch, and then after that for Victor and I to go up. So we're excited where we are right now. We're excited to continue training, to finish up the testing, and get ready for launch.
Well said. Important step on a long journey, and we're looking forward to the data analysis and learning more about the test today and the recovery efforts. Like I said, those are still going on, and yeah, we're grateful for all the hard work to get here, and looking forward to the work that we have left to do.
Well, thank you all. For more information, you go to nasa.gov. Thanks. Have a great day.
Miyake.
And my name's Kelly Marie Tran. And we're at NASA's Johnson Space Center.
And we're training to be astronauts.
No big deal. No big deal at all. We got this.
Come on, let us do it.
Let's go.
The first thing we're going to show you this morning is what's called a gravity offload system. So people often think that we have a room here where you can go in and flip a switch and suddenly you're floating. That's not really how it works.
You want to see how it works when you're 1/6 your weight or 3/8 your weight. We use Argos to do that. And then we use it to work on like new tools, new geology, sampling procedures. So from here, what we do is we'll lift you up off the ground.
Oh my God!
And we'll put you into lunar gravity.
What is that?
All right, so this right here is zero gravity. So if you were at the space station and I were to push you and say, see ya, you're just gonna put him away the way I push you.
So what did you guys think of that? It was so cool. I was saying I realize now why astronauts walk like this.
Yeah!
Because everyone's just like trying as much as possible.
Do you guys want to go check out suits?
Yeah.
Want to go try some on? All right. Yeah. We'll do that next.
So we're going to talk to you a little bit about spacesuits today. We're going to move some suits over here, I think, real quick, and we'll talk to you a little bit about what they are, and then we're going to let you guys change and actually try some out.
So you go out there and there's no air. So then there's pressure pushing in on your body?
So what we would have to go through is your body would want to expand out, so that's why we wear a suit around us that goes through and creates an artificial atmosphere.
Do you guys have training in terms of how quickly you can get in and out of these? Is that a thing or not?
No, I mean you have to know your spacesuit really well, but we don't do drills like getting in them quickly. You typically are helping each other, getting into and out of them when you're in space.
And so those tubes actually are going to create cold water, help us cool. We'll see what that feels like once we get inside. These guys are going to help you climb the missions.
Yeah, like
Chewy. The guy who plays Chewbacca.
Really? Stand up.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to get you guys out of the suit now, but then we're going to take you over and see the vehicle that you would be in the suits in.
Okay.
In the Orion vehicle.
This is the Space Launch System. This is what's going to push this capsule. This is the Artemis 1. This is going to go to the moon about 1 year from now.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay. 9 and 9 it.
Yeah.
This is the docking hatch up here. When we get to the gateway, we will dock at that port, and there will be a hatch up there that we open to go into
Which
the
you
gateway.
have to target, right? So you have to figure out a way to drive the rocket so that the holes match up.
Bingo. You know how
Right?
precise it is? First of all, relative to the Earth, we're going over 20,000 miles an hour, and when we dock, meet up with this plus or minus 1 inch, plus or minus 1 degree in each axis.
Okay,
That's really difficult.
Yeah, we actually make the switches, it's a multi-step so you don't accidentally hit a switch.
We're gonna go check out the mock-ups for the space station, which will seem luxuriously large.
Okay.
This gives you an idea of how big of a room each person gets. You can put up,
So yeah, you do. You have a sleeping bag, as they mentioned, and you can pin that to the wall, and you can float kind of inside your sleeping bag. You can tighten it down if you would like to feel a little bit more stable.
This is Houston. Yes. This is when they actually say Houston, we have a problem. This is Houston.
So that's live.
They're in space right now. What are they doing? Oh my gosh, it's mad.
What's the day-to-day like in this room? So in this room, we have 3 shifts a day. My favorite shift is the night shift because it's when nobody's in this building, but we get to hang out with the crew.
Are you guys ready to try some space food?
Yes.
That's next on the list.
Where do you get the suggestions of what to work on next?
That's a great question. We get a lot from the crew office, or the crew office says, can we move away from red meat and potatoes and get Brussels sprouts, butternut squash? And this comes from a lot of crew comments as well as input from the nutrition line here at JSC that says, you guys should probably go with the salt in there. So on station, the astronauts have a much more advanced
Version of
hydration
this?
apparatus.
Okay.
They have the potable water dispenser. The astronauts can help you with figuring out how to unlock the straw.
Release this.
Great.
Because otherwise, so that way when you set it down, liquid's not going to come up and out on it.
Stuff is at the bottom, so you want to like.
She knows the tricks of the trade.
Yeah. Which one is your favorite?
I would say the butternut squash is my favorite. But I like things that are sweet.
I like the Brussels sprouts, I think. They're so good. All right, well, you guys have had your afternoon snack. Now you ready to go drive a lunar rover? All right, let's go check it out.
I really don't know how to drive. This is like going to be a teacher.
Oh,
What is that? Oh, is it here? Ooh, it's air conditioned. It's air conditioned?
Twist. Yep.
This is so cool.
On the lunar surface, it'll basically be you're in the rover, like Megan and Jessica will be in the rover for up to 14 days living together. And there'll be another rover, they'll go out for 14 days and explore. And if one breaks down, all four of you will jump in one vehicle.
I think I made contact. I think we're there.
Awesome.
We're there.
Yeah.
That was
Nicely
smooth.
done. That was awesome.
Dude, what an amazing day. It's been really good. It's been amazing. It's more than I expected. Yeah. I have so much respect for NASA. Yeah. Thank you for bringing us here.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Sono Germana da Asi. Mi senti bene?
I'm ready for the event.
Yes, you hear me clearly.
ESA, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Ciao Luca, sono Germana da Asi. Mi senti bene?
Hello, Germana. Hello, Luca. I'm Germana. Can you hear me well?
Ciao Germana.
Hello, Germana.
Buongiorno.
Hello.
Ti sento benissimo, forte e
I
chiaro.
hear
Voi
you
mi sentite?
very well, loud and clear. How do you hear me?
Noi ti sentiamo benissimo, è un piacere
We hear you very clearly, and it's a pleasure to see you in great shape to speak with you today. We'll pass to you Giorgio Saccocia, the president of ASI, the Italian Space Agency. Hello, Giorgio. Welcome to ASI. This is a beautiful scene that we have here with all these kids. We're so glad you're with us. Don't want to make, I don't want to waste any time with my chatter. I wish that we could speak longer. I'm sorry we don't have more, but let me pass the kids along to you right away. Thank you, Giorgio.
Ciao Giorgio, grazie del benvenuto.
Hello, Giorgio.
A presto.
Thank you. You're welcome, and it's good to be with you. See you soon. Talk to you soon.
Ciao, sono Francesco.
Hello, I'm Francesco.
Abbiamo letto che la complessità
The complexity of the extravehicular activities 10th December was compared to that
riparazione del telescopio
the preparation of the Hubble
che avete svolto e che benefici ci saranno per la ricerca.
telescope. Can you tell us what benefits the telescope will provide to research? Thank you. It's a wonderful question. I'll try to answer it in just a few words because it's of great complexity.
AMS è uno spettrometro alfa
AMS is a spectrometer which is composed of many parts, among which the magnets and elevators, which are of large extent, which are able to then capture particles within their interiors. This system has got to be refrigerated. Refrigeration used to be done through 4 pumps, which would continue to circulate the carbonic substance. And this system worked well beyond the expected life, but the pumps lost their ability to circulate, and so the cooling system didn't work so well, and so the temperatures were not at the right range. And so we installed a new pump, which should last right to the end of the station's orbit period. And to be able to install them, since the system was not designed to be repaired, we had to use the old refrigeration system. And so what we did is we opened and cut the tubes that were running, through which the carbonic substance was running. We installed new tubes or pipes into the pump with its own load of carbonic substance. And we call it, the operation is called swaging. It's a sort of hydraulic welding. And so we activated the pump, and we attached it to the control system, which has electrical components. And so now what we have to do is to open up the carbonic reserves to see if there have been any loss. We've done this, and this required an extravehicular flight. What happened is that this EMS system is the only one that of its nature that is in orbit, and these little particles that we're searching to detect are so very rare that it is very difficult to capture them. And the fact that they are outside of the Earth's atmosphere makes it possible to have a system that is much more refined in order to capture and to remove particles that otherwise would never have arrived to Earth. That's why it's important. The complexity consists in the fact that we've had to work for many years to develop techniques and procedures and instruments to be able to make operational a system that had not been designed for the purpose, and so we had to start from zero to develop this system. Hello, I'm Sophia. In what manner can the space station help us to understand the environmental damage that we're doing to our Earth? And from your observational point, privileged observation point, what do you think we should be able to look at to be able to see? The thing that strikes most every astronaut the most is the fragility of the system. We look at the Earth, something that is static when we're on it, something that's immobile. We see the mountains, the forests, the sea, we see the glaciers. But from the space station, we can see the changes in the Earth. Unfortunately, we can see over the past several years a constant deterioration including major disasters on a global scale. And so the effects can be seen much more clearly from this distance above. We can see how all of these systems on Earth are interrelated, and how our presence and our influence as human beings changes the nature and changes the Earth. And this gives us a sense of very high sense of responsibility, of the fragility that remains with us even when we return to Earth. And it's remained me as of the first day that I arrived in orbit. And so I think this is the perspective of the fragility of the major elements of the Earth, which we are privileged to be able to observe. Hello, I'm Jonathan. What is the hardest part of, the most difficult part of the preparation of an astronaut? Is it the psychological, is it the physical, is it the technical aspect? Hello. Well, if you followed me over time, maybe not, you would know. I never waste time, because I believe that a waste of time is something that it's hard to find one thing as being more difficult than another. The most difficult thing that I'm doing is the one that I'm actually performing. because I have to be fully committed to it. And as of each moment, there's an element of communication and education, which is very difficult, but is also very interesting. Athletic training, physical training is difficult, but I really like it, but I fully commit myself to it, and from that I derive satisfaction, as well as the technical aspect, which requires a great deal of application. For somebody who, like me, comes from a non-technical but a flight environment, and so we have to, I've had to learn a number of scientific techniques and concepts. I found it difficult, but I think maybe the most wonderful part of our work is to be able to find the difficulties which seem insurmountable are those that which you can, in fact, overcome through application and work. So I never think about the difficulties of a task. I always think about what is the final result that we're aiming at, what can we learn, and the more difficult something is, the more complex it is, the greater is the final satisfaction.
Ciao, sono Alessio.
Hello, I'm Alessio.
Il nostro esperimento. Hai avuto qualche preoccupazione per il fatto che era stato proposto e poi realizzato
in
una scuola media superiore?
Have you had any concerns about the fact that our contribution to the scientific program comes from a middle school? No, absolutely not, because the standards are the same for all. The safety standards, for example, for which reason I had no doubt whatsoever that the system was well contained and well designed. And also because you have to extend your confidence to the younger generation, to the kids, because the fact that you've come from an advanced school does not necessarily mean that they have the right knowledge to prepare a project properly. But once these projects come to the station, I'm 100% sure that the project has been well designed. I'm Matthew. Hi.
E ritorna al suo sogno d'occhi aperti, tante volte immaginato da bambino adolescente.
When you close your eyes, go to sleep, and then you wake up again, do you remember the dreams that you had as an adolescent young man?
E lei, che con questo cielo a stretto contatto, cosa ci direbbe per realizzare i nostri sogni?
You who are in very close contact, of course, with the entire program, what do you recommend to us to be able to realize our dreams? I'll tell you this. Certainly for me, it is a great privilege and a great piece of good luck, good fortune to be able to have realized one of my dreams, because I still have a lot of dreams, even to this day. But my conviction, and I'm sure that also the advice, is that what gives you satisfaction is what makes us really feel that we have fulfillments in life, is when we have a plan or project that we have to implement in order to realize our dreams. It gives us a sense of direction in which to move. The satisfaction comes from the realization and completion of the project on a daily basis. For example, today, and just this particular moment today, there's nothing more important for me than talking to you. Right now, I'm preparing a series of activities for this afternoon that could be more or less important, but the realization, the implementation of each one. For example, tonight I'll have the possibility of going to sleep, that I've done good work, and so I look at these projects on a very brief daily, weekly, monthly, and then yearly basis, as well as 4 or 5 days in advance. And so what I recommend to young people is to concentrate on the projects, whether they be large, small, or medium-sized, is to concentrate on each one of these and to derive satisfaction from satisfactorily effectively. What do you plan to do with it? A month, 6 months, a year? Concentrate on your immediate and intermediate objectives. In a general sense, for example, I'm going north, south, east, or west, but also consider the route that you follow, which consists of the daily projects that you engage in. Those are the ones that give you satisfaction because you're moving towards your objectives. Hello, I'm David.
Dalla stazione spaziale quando si torna sulla Terra, sapendo di aver portato a termine un obiettivo, e qual è la...
What is the feeling that you have when you return to Earth, knowing that you've completed objectives set forth, and also what are the physical sensations? I can respond to you. with fairly coherently because I have these are experiences I've already had. First of all, I don't know whether returning to Earth, returning from space to Earth can really let me say that I've completed a project. I've done work, and I will immediately search out an objective when I return. But going back to what I previously said, I hope to return with the satisfaction of having completed a project, a part of a project, to have contributed to a program. That is what which consists of what we do on the space station. And then from the physical standpoint, the strangest thing, and also in a certain sense, the one that concerns me the most is the fact that I know that this sensation, you see this freedom that I have in being able to move through various dimensions, this sensation, this memory, almost immediately vanishes because I'm so accustomed to life on Earth, under gravity, subject to gravity, but immediately the ability to be able to move harmonically is quickly forgotten. This ability to move without concerns in a multidimensional, three-dimensional sense. The loss, the vanishing of this feeling is perhaps the saddest thing of a return to Earth. I know that physically what I will feel will probably the weight of my body, of my head on my shoulders, my arms, and my body on my spinal column, and of my body on my legs. That weight that I will feel, I don't know which is most important. Perhaps for me, the only way that I have to be able to lift myself up above these things is from the mental standpoint, is to concentrate immediately on other objectives when I return and not on my physical condition. For example, now I'm able to enjoy the fact that I'm able to move so easily, and then to be able to enjoy those things that you can have once you return to Earth. Enjoy those things. Hello, I'm Aurora. What is your next objective? My next objective is to complete today all of the work that I have to do on my agenda. It's important to concentrate on that, and then certainly I have many objectives. The objective of returning to Earth and to be able then to continue work that gives me satisfaction, also to think of what will happen or be in terms of astronautics, my next destination, what that will be. I have dreams, I have projects and plans. It's difficult to think of what in particular. Certainly as an astronaut, I continue to do this work and to go further. That, for example, with Asi, Giorgio, you know very well that the objectives that we have as Italians, as Europeans, is to be able to return to the moon. We have a strong, great hope to be able to contribute to that project. That's my great hope. Hello, I'm Rossella. Certainly life on the space station is very difficult from that on Earth, but the needs are the same. Do you ever dream about your return to Earth, what you'll be doing and how it will be? I am not very strong or very good at remembering dreams while I was sleeping. When I awake, they sort of disappear. I have not noticed any great differences between being on Earth and being on board in terms of dreams, but of course, speaking philosophically, when I'm on Earth, I dream of being here. When I'm here, I dream of being back on Earth in a philosophical sense. I don't think there's any great difference in the way that we dream, but it would be an interesting subject for investigation. Hello, I am Larissa. What is the most fascinating spectacle that you have seen from space? Even there, it's hard to respond because I would have to then set a scale of things in a sense that it's impossible to do, even to begin to describe. I can say that every time that I look outside of the station or go outside of the station, and there's something new that I haven't seen before, and I think that very quickly I'm going to be staying aboard for a longer time during the days of the secondary mission, objectives. And there's not been a single day in which, looking out, I have not thought, well, I've seen this before. No, every time it's something new.
C'è qualcosa di diverso.
It's something different. There's the light is different, the colors, a passage over a certain part of the earth. There's something always that surprises me and makes me think, I have not seen this before. The changing of the seasons of the lights, my own disposition, my own self changes. And it would be good to say, well, the atmospheric atmosphere is more interesting. Perhaps the look of a river that empties into the sea, or the northern or southern auroras, which are different and change. The sunset of the moon with the atmosphere that's below, the clouds, all of these. It's impossible, really, to describe everything that we see, and certainly to put them on a scale of fascinations. Everything is fascinating, and everything is equally beautiful and fragile. Hello, Luca. I am Emma. What do you have? What's involved in being an astronaut in a general sense? I think the sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice. I continue to do that. Our friends, our family, our parents, they're the ones who make the sacrifice, as do our children. We are not really sacrificing because we're doing this work. It's a dream for most of us, and for many people, to do what we're doing. We're always conscious of what we have to do in order to fulfill our missions. This course of work takes us back to those who are not aware of this, because those who are on Earth do not have any concept of this way of life. To be away from your children, your family for a month or a week, as time goes on, my heart is somewhat broken. But as time proceeds, I think the greatest sacrifice is that, and that the knowledge of dragging behind you the sacrifices of other people who have not made this choice of life as I have. Hello, Juca. I'm Germana. Unfortunately, our time with you is over. It's always a very emotional thing to be able to speak with you. I wish we could spend more time. I wish you could be here in the auditorium to see how it's full of enthusiastic people, but we're able to hear you. And here we go.
Ciao a tutti, grazie del vostro tempo. Grazie.
So long to everybody. Thank you for your time and your attention and for your questions. Thanks once again.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes our event as we count down to 20 continuous years of humans living and working on the International Space Station.
Thank you to Luca and to all participants from ESA. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. We're ready.
Fort Worth Academy, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call Station for a voice check.
Station, this is Fort Worth Academy. How do you hear me?
Fort Worth Academy, we have you loud and clear. Welcome aboard the International Space Station.
Hi, I'm Lauren Parker with the kindergarten through 8th grade students of Fort Worth Academy. We're so excited to talk with you as we celebrate Space Week.
Hi, I'm Blythe from 1st grade. How does it feel to bounce around in space?
Well, it's a lot of fun. In fact, we thought we'd do a little demonstration for you. So as you can see, it's a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Ellie from 5th grade. What would happen if you tried to play with slime in space?
That is a great question, and I hear that you guys have been making some slime as well. Here in space, there wouldn't be any gravity to pull that slime down in a long tendril, so actually it would probably just ball up in a ball, and if you wanted to slime somebody, you'd actually have to make it like a projectile and fire it at them. So it'd be a little different, but it'd probably still be just as fun.
Hi, I'm Lourdes from 8th grade. What role does the International Space Station play in the process of building a sustained presence on the moon?
Well, as I think you're probably already aware, it is our goal at NASA currently to go back to the moon and eventually go on to Mars. So all that we're doing up here on the International Space Station, a lot of the data and experiments that we've been conducting for decades now are providing us with a wealth of scientific data, especially looking at things like human physiology and medicine, what happens to the body after long-duration spaceflight. We have learned many lessons from this sustained presence that we have up here on the space station. The space station also serves as a sort of proving ground and test bed for other pieces of hardware. One of those important things is life support systems. Of course, life support systems inside the space station, in our spacecraft, even in our spacesuits, are all very relevant to that future exploration as well.
Hi, I'm Kason from 8th grade. What is it like knowing that you have an opportunity few people will have in their lives of living and working in space?
Well, we view it as a great honor, and we view it as our responsibility to share it with others. We know that we're very privileged to be here, and we have a huge team supporting us on the ground in order to enable this to happen. And so we like to do events just like this to reach out and show you the magic of being in space, but also the benefits to people on Earth, as well as our opportunities to explore further in the universe as a result of our experience up here.
Hi, I'm Kai from 5th grade. When you spill something like water on your clothes, do they get wet or does the water just sit on top?
Sounds like another great opportunity for a demonstration of what might happen. So we're making a big ball of water here, and you can see the forces in the water want to stay in a sphere. And it wants to stick to anything it can, to include the straw. We'll make another ball here, and I'll let it hit my shirt, and you can see exactly what would happen. Just like the water wants to stick to itself, stick to the straw, it also will stick to my shirt.
But it does still get things wet as well. As you can see with Drew, if we squirt him with water, he still gets wet just like he would on the ground. It is interesting, though, some of the fabrics they provide us help us keep clean. So some of the pants, for example, that we have are a little bit more hydrophobic. They repel the water, and so it'll bead up on there, and you can wipe it off if you spill something inadvertently, since we do wear these pants for quite a long time.
Hi, I am Charlie from kindergarten. How have you celebrated holidays and other special events in space?
Sometimes we do like to remind ourselves of our normal life on the ground, even though, as we talked about, we're so lucky to be up here. So it is important for us psychologically, especially on these long duration missions, to recognize those things that we normally do on the ground, like holidays. So we've actually had several holidays together during this mission, some really big ones. We had Thanksgiving together, we had Hanukkah and Christmas up here during the holiday season, and we also had New Year's. So what we did, we gathered together with our crewmates, the three of us, but also our commander, Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano, and two of our Russian colleagues as well, cosmonauts that are up here with us and part of our crew. So we usually gather together and have a great meal together. We spend some time sometimes playing music, talking about, you know, things on the ground. We gave each other presents on Christmas. So we do it much like you do on the ground, just even more special up here.
Hi, I'm Ella from 8th grade. How have your previous leadership experiences prepared you for your stay in space?
I love that question because before I came to the International Space Station, and before I was selected as an astronaut, I was and still am an Army officer, where we talk about leadership a lot. But what I've found as an astronaut, the important quality is being a good teammate, which means to be able to move between being a leader and being a follower very readily. On one day, one person may be in charge of it, but the next day somebody else may be in charge, and you need to then fall in and become a follower just the same. And so that's an important quality of a good teammate, is being able to move back and forth through those roles and respect whoever is in charge and their decisions. It's a quality that it takes time to develop, and one of the most important qualities in a good team member.
Hi, I'm Isaac from 1st grade. What made you want to be an astronaut?
Well, when I was even younger than you are, if you can believe it, I first decided that I wanted to be an astronaut. And sometimes I'm not even sure what made me want to be one, because it's just all that I can ever remember wanting to be. I think that I love the idea of exploring my world. I loved playing in the woods. I loved going to the ocean. I loved looking at the night sky. And those things reminded me that there was so much more to see and discover out there in the world. And from there, I just kept pursuing the things that I loved and I was passionate about, and I kept working hard. And eventually I found myself living that dream out and being able to be an astronaut exploring in space.
Hi, I'm Ido from 8th grade. With all the new technology that we have developed since our last missions to the moon, what new experiments will be done and what advances will be made during the Artemis program?
You know, that is a great question in a time when people have noticed we have been to the moon before, and so you might think, why would we go back? There's so much more to discover there. There's both science that can be done on the moon in terms of planetary science. Like, for example, the moon is almost like the Rosetta Stone of our entire solar system's formation. Within the moon's geology, we can understand how the solar system formed, which informs how our own planet formed and the rest of the planet. So there's a lot of scientific relevance in going back to the moon. But also, it's a stepping stone for going farther into our solar system, like onward to Mars. And in Mars, we can discover and answer really huge questions, such as, is there life elsewhere outside of Earth? And things like that that really mean a lot to all of humanity. So there's multiple reasons that we are heading back to the moon, and we're doing so soon and to stay.
Hi, I'm Mahan from 3rd grade. What does your daily schedule look like, and what do you do in your free time?
Well, that's an interesting question because, you know, we are up here for a long period of time, and our time up here is very precious, and there's a lot invested in our time, and so every moment is scheduled. But our day looks probably very much like a day on Earth in terms of we still need to sleep and we still need to eat, and we spend time in our day exercising. But we also spend a fair amount of our time doing maintenance of the space station. In fact, just yesterday we had to do, Jessica and Christina were on a spacewalk where they were doing maintenance of the space station outside the space station in space suits. And so we have had a couple of spacewalks during our time up here on board. And then we're also conducting scientific experiments on a daily basis. We always have science that we need to tend to, and we're running the experiments for scientists on the ground. So our days stay very packed. They're very full. Every hour is accounted for.
Hi, I'm Afif from 2nd grade. How do you use robots on the International Space Station?
Well, one of the most important pieces of robotic hardware that we have up here on the International Space Station is the Canadarm, or the robotic arm that's on the outside of the space station. It's this really large robotic arm that can be moved around to help people on spacewalks. So, for example, in the spacewalk that Drew mentioned yesterday, the arm was actually holding some batteries for us that Christina and I were getting and moving from one location to the next, basically in order to upgrade the batteries for the space station, going from an older technology to new lithium-ion batteries, just like you use in all your devices on the ground. Sometimes the robotic arm moves astronauts as well outside, and sometimes it moves things around even without us on it, just moving different pieces of hardware, even in the beginning during the construction of the space station, moving entire modules around in order to configure things on the International Space Station. So that's probably the biggest, maybe not your conventional idea of a robot, but we have had some other robots on the space station too. We had Robonaut, who was up here previously and will be coming up here again to demonstrate some other applications that do have relevancy to future exploration as well. We have a small robot just right over here, Astrobe, that we'll bring off the wall here. And have you guys ever done? I actually haven't participated in the Astrobe experiments, but Christina might be able to tell a little bit about that.
Yes, these are called our Astrobe robots, and they are going to be used autonomously to perform little tasks around station. For example, finding items that people need to gather, taking pictures of different configurations, and other tasks like that. And the really neat thing about this robot is that it can find its way around actually by using cameras in real time, and it has the entire station mapped out so it can tell where it is and where it needs to go and just work on its own. So it's been really fun bringing these robots into stations since I've been here.
Hi, I'm Alex from 7th grade. What is an interesting experiment you have worked on?
I'll tell you about one experiment that Jessica and I do together. It's called fluid shifts, which studies how the fluids in our bodies, to include our blood, change how they flow and how they operate inside our bodies in the absence of gravity. And it's an interesting experiment because it also involves our Russian colleagues as well, and we use a device called Chibis, which tries to simulate the effects of gravity by using vacuum to suck the blood from our upper body down into our lower body, just like it would on Earth if you had gravity. We also use ultrasound in this experiment. Ultrasound devices uses sound waves to look at our hearts and the vessels in our necks, and allows us to see how the fluid and the blood flow changes as a result of living in microgravity for a long period of time.
Hi, I'm Ashley from 4th grade. How do you stay connected to your family and friends from the International Space Station?
Well, it's actually pretty easy on the International Space Station. It will be more challenging when we go to further destinations like Mars. But up here, we have programs on our laptop computers, much like you do on the ground. It functions a bit like Skype would. So we can use a program on our computer to call down to anybody's cell phone. So we could go right now and dial any of you up on this laptop. We also have some video conferencing software, kind of like a FaceTime or Skype again, that allows us to do that on video. So we have weekly family conferences with our loved ones on the ground so that we can not only hear their voices but also see their faces.
Hi, I'm Emma from 6th grade. What training did you receive to effectively work with a variety of different cultures and languages in space?
That's a great question, because one of the best things about the International Space Station is international cooperation between multiple countries, part of the program. And as we mentioned earlier, right now we have an Italian, 3 Americans, and 2 Russians on board. And so it's very important to understand each other's cultures. When we were selected as astronauts, we immediately began learning the Russian language, because on board the International Space Station we speak Russian or English. Those are the official languages, despite what your native language may be. And that's just one of many examples of how we try to come together in a common understanding, but a mutual respect for one another. And it will be one of the greatest legacies of the International Space Station program is the international cooperation, something that we will carry forward with us into the Artemis program as we return to the surface of the moon by 2024.
Hi, I'm Michael from 7th grade. Was there a time you thought you could not complete a challenge, and how did you overcome that?
You know, there have been so many instances throughout the last 6 to 7 years since I was selected to become an astronaut where I was faced with something that at first I thought was an insurmountable challenge. From the training we first got, the day we walked through the door, through the flight training to get here, through all of the incredible and dynamic events that we get to do up here. So that included from the beginning, for me, learning how to be a pilot of a high-performance aircraft, all the way through flight training where I first started learning how to be a co-pilot in a Soyuz spaceship, and then up here doing several EVAs or spacewalks within the course of a mission. All those things at first seemed like they were impossible. It seemed like a mountain of things to do in front of me that I might never ever accomplish. And I think the trick is just taking it one chunk at a time, recognizing that step by step you can achieve these huge goals and very, very difficult challenges. It involves grit. It involves accepting failure sometimes, and it involves recognizing that you do have the strength to overcome the challenges no matter what they are. So I would say all of those challenges sort of put together really defined the last several years, probably for all of us. In fact, overcoming things that seemed at first like you couldn't is kind of the name of the game in astronaut training and in being on board the International Space Station. But that's what makes it so fulfilling and so meaningful.
Hi, I'm Electra from 1st grade. How do you know when to sleep and when to wake up in space?
Well, sleep is very important to me. It's one of my favorite things to do, down on the ground and up here. And we follow the same sort of schedules. Again, you know, it is interesting because we don't have the circadian rhythms of the sun. You know, we don't have the same number of hours of consistent light and darkness that we use for those cues on the ground. But we do try to maintain some of that. For example, with our lights, we have these newer light systems which have different intensities. So in the morning, we have what's called a phase shift, have a really bright light to wake us up. And then as we progress through the day, we decrease that intensity that simulates what the sunlight would be like on the ground. Otherwise, we use the same things you do on the ground. We use clocks. We use alarm clocks. I know I, for one, would never wake up on my own in time if it weren't for an alarm clock. So all the same practices you guys are using on the ground as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We've really enjoyed spending this time with you.
Thank you to Fort Worth Academy. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes our event as we count down to 20 continuous years of humans living and working on the International Space Station.
Thank you to all the participants from Fort Worth Academy Station. We are now resuming operational audio communications.
Today, the crew will visit the nickel, hydrogen, and lithium-ion batteries at the P6 truss that have been worked on throughout the previous 2 spacewalks last year, and they'll continue to work on those in an upcoming spacewalk on Monday, January 20th. But today's spacewalkers are NASA's Jessica Meir, who is EV1. She'll be wearing red stripes around the legs on her suit, and Christina Cook, who's EV2 or Spacewalker 2, and will be wearing a plain white suit. You can see astronaut Jessica Meir, EV1 or Spacewalker 1, egressing the hatch now, flying about 267 statute miles over the Indian Ocean.
Okay, Christina, I have egress, and I'm going to move over to the forward side. Copy. V1 copies in work. V2 copies. One is in back. I still see that this side is a little bit higher. There we go. There. Okay, I got a hand on it, and I think we're there now. Yep, I concur. I believe we're in stop down.
Christina, lock out the ret leaving slack, and you'll use Jessica's PGT.
Copy. It's locked out.
Copy.
As NASA astronaut Christina Cook holds the battery, you can see she's wearing an all-white suit, designating her as Spacewalker 2 today.
Just be aware that coming outboard and the battery is between you and me. Copy. And I can move it if you do need that space.
Copy.
I have tape line flush and move it to back a little bit. Here, I'll do that. Yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm waiting. So yeah, copy. Okay.
Drive H2.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm ready for turn.
16 to 17 turns.
Nice to see you tracking. Hey, Stephanie, Christina is back on structure. Are you ready for me to release H2? You have the ret on.
Copy, the ret's in place, and is it locked out with slack?
Is 57. We can talk about that as well. So again, there is just remarkable.
Have to say, okay, I'm at 75, 80, it's time to recharge. You can never, you can't just operate exhausted because then you can't react to an emergency. And so our world map was really our best indication of where we were.
And we also have CrewNet. So we do have internet from space. So I could hop on Google if I wanted to.
We lost just a hand wrench one time, and it had been gone for probably a month. And the thing about Nick's launch aboard is that a lot of people say they call it an unsuccessful launch. And for all of us, I said this is a very successful.
And unfortunately, every mission comes to an end back. And you're surrounded by people, the people that have invested their time reaching out with the arm after spending years training on how to do it right.
EM1 vehicle attached to the front of space station. Got to dive in. We do tease our crewmates that are looking for a structure that is recreated when you're in space. Is it the same strength? And kind of the answer seems to be no, it's not quite the same strength. But how bad is it more in the long term?
As an engineer, I'm not the scientist, right? But necessarily be coherent depending on where you abort. So you need an autonomous system, but you also need the ability for the crew to intervene. Morning, you sitting there in PMA1 and getting your quiet time. We can use those for transplants, and that's going to help people. So I know that's a long ways away, but the potential's there.
The other thing I noticed was, you don't use a lot of your small stabilizing muscles up in space, and so they also get really sore in the first couple of weeks. They're like these muscles I never knew existed until they were sore. Yeah, a lot of people talk about our different cultures too, but there's a culture that not a lot of people talk about, but we think about a lot, and that's our common space culture. And every astronaut that we've gotten an opportunity to work with out of the head, I said, there's our wrench.
Today, the crew will visit the nickel, hydrogen, and lithium-ion batteries at the P6 truss that have been worked on throughout the previous 2 spacewalks last year, and they'll continue to work on those in an upcoming spacewalk on Monday, January 20th. But today's spacewalkers are NASA's Jessica Meir, who is EV1. She'll be wearing red stripes around the legs on her suit, and Christina Cook, who's EV2 or Spacewalker 2, and will be wearing a plain white suit. You can see astronaut Jessica Meir, EV1 or Spacewalker 1, egressing the hatch now, flying about 267 statute miles over the Indian Ocean.
Okay, Christina, I've egressed, and I'm going to move over to the forward side. Copy. V1 copies, in work. V2 copies. One is in that. I still see that this side is a little bit higher. There we go. There. Okay, I got a hand on it, and I think we're there now. Yep, I concur. I believe we're in stop down.
Christina, lock out the ret leaving slack, and you'll use Jessica's PGT.
Copy. It's locked out.
Copy.
As NASA astronaut Christina Cook holds the battery, you can see she's wearing an all-white suit, designating her as Spacewalker 2 today.
Just be aware that coming outboard and the battery is between you and me. Copy. And I can move it if you do need that space.
Copy.
I have tape line flush and move it to back a little bit. Here, I'll do that. Yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm waiting. So yeah, copy. Okay.
Drive H2.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm ready for turn.
16 to 17 turns.
Nice to see you tracking. Hey, Stephanie, Christina is back on structure. Are you ready for me to release H2? You have the ret on.
Copy, the ret's in place, and is it locked out with slack?
There's 57, we can talk about that as well. So again, there is just remarkable.
Have to say, okay, I'm at 75, 80, it's time to recharge. You can never, you can't just operate exhausted because then you can't react to an emergency. And so our world map was really our best indication of where we were.
And we also have CrewNet. So we do have internet from space. So I could hop on Google if I wanted to.
We lost just a hand wrench one time, and it had been gone for probably a month. And the thing about Nick's launch abort is that a lot of people say they call it an unsuccessful launch. And for all of us, I said this is a very successful.
And unfortunately, every mission comes to a back. and you're surrounded by people, the people that have invested their time, reaching out with the arm after spending years training on how to do it right.
EM1 vehicle attached to the front of space station. Got to dive in. We do tease our crewmates that are looking for a structure that is recreated when you're in space. Is it the same strength? And kind of the answer seems to be no, it's not quite the same strength. But how bad is it? What are the long-term?
As an engineer, I'm not the scientist, right? But necessarily be coherent depending on where you abort. So you need an autonomous system, but you also need the ability for the crew to intervene. Morning, you sitting there and PMA 1 and getting your quiet time. We can use those for transplants, and that's going to help people. So I know that's a long ways away, but the potential's there.
The other thing I noticed was, you don't use a lot of your small stabilizing muscles up in space, and so they also get really sore in the first couple of weeks. They're like these muscles I never knew existed until they were sore. Yeah, a lot of people talk about our different cultures too, but there's a culture that not a lot of people talk about, but we think about a lot, and that's our common space culture. And every astronaut that we've gotten an opportunity to work with, side of the head, I said, there's our wrench.
Today, the crew will visit the nickel, hydrogen, and lithium-ion batteries at the P6 truss that have been worked on throughout the previous 2 spacewalks last year, and they'll continue to work on those in an upcoming spacewalk on Monday, January 20th. But today's spacewalkers are NASA's Jessica Meir, who is EV1. She'll be wearing red stripes around the legs on her suit, and Christina Cook, who's EV2 or Spacewalker 2, and will be wearing a plain white suit. You can see astronaut Jessica Meir, EV1 or Spacewalker 1, egressing the hatch now, flying about 267 statute miles over the Indian Ocean.
Okay, Christina, I've egressed, and I'm going to move over to the forward side. Copy. D1 copies, in work. D2 copies. One is in back. I still see that this side is a little bit higher. There we go. There. Okay, I got a hand on it, and I think we're there now. Yep, I concur. I believe we're in stop down.
Christina, lock out the Rhett leaving slack, and you'll use Jessica's PGT.
It's locked out.
Copy.
As NASA astronaut Christina Cook holds the battery, you can see she's wearing an all-white suit, designating her as Spacewalker 2 today.
And just be aware that coming outboard and the battery is between you and me. Copy. And I can move it if you do need that space.
Copy.
I have tape line flush and move it to back a little bit. Here, I'll do that. Yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm waiting. So yeah, copy. Okay.
Drive H2.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm ready for turn.
16 to 17 turns.
Nice to be tracking. Hey, Stephanie, Christina is back on structure. Are you ready for me to release H2? You have the Rhett on.
Copy, the Rhett's in place, and is it locked out with slack?
Is 57, we can talk about that as well. So again, there is just remarkable.
have to say, okay, I'm at 75, 80, it's time to recharge. You can never, you can't just operate exhausted because then you can't react to an emergency. And so our world map was really our best indication of where we were.
And we also have CrewNet. So we do have internet from space. So I could hop on Google if I wanted to.
We lost just a hand wrench one time, and it had been gone for probably a month. And the thing about Nick's launch abort is that a lot of people say they call it an unsuccessful launch. And for all of us, I said this is a very successful.
And unfortunately, every mission comes to a back. And you're surrounded by people, the people that have invested their time reaching out with the arm after spending years training on how to do it right.
EM1 vehicle attached to the front of space station. Got to dive in. We do tease our crewmates that are looking for a structure that is recreated when you're in space. Is it the same strength? And kind of the answer seems to be no, it's not quite the same strength. But how bad is it more in the long term?
As an engineer, I'm not the scientist, right? But necessarily be coherent depending on where you abort. So you need an autonomous system, but you also need the ability for the crew to intervene. In the morning, you sitting there in PMA1 and getting your quiet time. We can use those for transplants, and that's going to help people. So I know that's a long ways away, but the potential's there.
The other thing I noticed was, you don't use a lot of your small stabilizing muscles up in space, and so they also get really sore in the first couple of weeks. They're like these muscles I never knew existed until they were sore. Yeah, a lot of people talk about our different cultures too, but there's a culture that not a lot of people talk about, but we think about a lot, and that's our common space culture. And every astronaut that we've gotten an opportunity to work with, I had, I said, there's our wrench.
50 years ago, we went to the moon. We called it Apollo.
What many people don't know is that Apollo had a twin.
She was a woman named Artemis, goddess of the moon.
We are returning to the moon.
As a new generation of explorers. This time to stay.
And to prepare to achieve humanity's next giant leap of sending the first human missions to Mars.
We believe our course will redefine what is possible.
That we would discover life-saving,
earth-changing science.
And that the challenges ahead will inspire generations.
This is our manifest.
For all who wondered if we could return.
For all who dreamed of pressing beyond.
This is your calling.
We go for all of America.
We go.
We go as the Artemis generation.
We go.
Today we're at the Kennedy Space Center where we are doing some really amazing things. In just a few days, we're going to launch the Boeing Starliner,